Hey, good morning. This is Mayor Valensky with Driving Markets. Okay, anything said in this piece is an opinion only. So let's kick off. And let's see what was driving markets, what will be driving markets. Well, we can't escape, we can't evade, we can't leave the topic of the banking crisis. Okay, so yesterday what happened was that First Republic Bank was saved by a $30 billion loan injection of capital for minimum 3 months by the big banks, by Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, to name but a few. That's a $30 billion loan to save the First Republic Bank in America. Okay, it's a high street bank. It's a lower level bank, but needs 30 billion. Not like Credit Suisse, which is a huge global bank, needed 50 billion. So First Republic needed 30 billion. It's a very, very small bank. And Credit Suisse only needed 50 billion. Is there not a distortion, the disparity? How does that work? Okay, surely Credit Suisse would need something like 200 billion, and then that would be pro rata relationship wise. First Republic would receive 30 billion. But you're telling me that First Republic is nearly as big as Credit Suisse? No, it's not. Credit Suisse did not receive enough money. First Republic probably received too much money, and that's really what the issue is. Now, let's really get a bit deeper into the First Republic. First Republic follows on from Silicon Valley Bank and from Signature and from the Silvergate crypto bank. Okay? Now, Janet Yellen has stated clearly that the banking system is absolutely fine. There's no problem with it. We can all calm down and relax. Wow. Whew. If Janet Yellen said that, then everything's fine. Because she's the same person that said in 2022, at the beginning of January, February, that by April, inflation is just a flash in the pan. It'll be all under control by April 2022. That's the same Janet Yellen that stated that regarding inflation. So now we can totally rely on Janet Yellen and totally rely on Jerome Powell and the Fed that they've all got it wrong. Now, what's going to happen in the banking system, in my opinion, and of course, I'm being binary here. So Dov, who says, don't be so binary, well, I'm going to be binary because my opinion is we're in for a major crisis, a major banking issue, a major banking downturn. And what's going to happen is, in my opinion, of course, what's likely to happen is that the central banks are going to have to intervene again. They're going to have to start printing money again in order to save the rotten banking system. The system is not working. Now, banks work on a simple basis. You deposit $1, they lend $10. They multiply, they leverage your money by 10 times. They lend to 10 different people, 10 different businesses your money. And you receive a small bit of interest, and that interest you pay tax. And that gives you the security of investing with a bank and the good feeling factor that you're getting money, your money's working, and everything's going to be fine. Everything is geared towards the banks. The banks effectively can't fail in a business because if they do fail, as seen in the past in 2008, they're bailed out. Now this is Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank was the second biggest bank crash in the history of America. The account holders at SVB, which is easier to say than Silicon Valley Bank, at SVB were mostly super rich, mostly unicorns, mostly high-tech exits, all those companies with millions in the account, millions. And the government, the Congress, the Senate, the FDIC, the Treasury all came in and saved those particular high-tech unicorn super rich individuals because the deposits were guaranteed up to $250,000. Anything above that, the government stepped in and saved them. Everything's fine. They say they haven't saved the bank, they've saved the depositors. Well, effectively they saved the bank because the bank would have to fork out all of that money and go bust. But effectively they said, no, we'll pay the depositors. Now, how long is that going to continue? Is the Fed or the Treasury going to continue with all banks? Is it going to pay all deposits that banks fail? Because more banks will fail. More banks are in trouble. There is here a major liquidity crisis. Now, that liquidity crisis is started as a result of rising interest rates, poor investments with some banks. But it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Why? Because as we go into a recession of 2023, 2024, remember, they've loaned money. The secondary banks have loaned money. I'm not talking about the top banks. We're just talking about the secondary banks. The secondary banks have loaned money to businesses. Those businesses are going to fail, default, and therefore the loan book at the secondary banks is going to go into default. So they're going to have to write off debt. Who's going to save the banks on those 10 times your dollar they've lent out? Who's going to save those banks? It's going to have to be the central government and the Fed. Now, you can put all other economic news aside. CPI inflation in the States came in line, so still rock solid on inflation. PPI came in line, still rock solid on producer price inflation. Retail sales were down for February, indicating that people are getting more and more careful with spending their money. Now, that is a sure sign of recession, which is good for the Fed, because the Fed will say, well, if we're going to recession, there'll be less money expansionary, less rising costs, therefore we won't have to raise rates even more. Well, the Fed probably will raise rates again at the next meeting, but it's going to have a major problem if this crisis deepens, and raising rates it's going to put more pressure on the banks themselves and on the system themselves. So this banking crisis could be a good angle for not increasing interest rates. However, if they don't continue raising interest rates, inflation is likely to rise even further. If inflation rises even further, it's going to put the central banks into a major problem. Yesterday, the ECB raised it by 50 basis points, irrespective of what's going on in the market, and there were negative comments towards Christine Lagarde that she shouldn't have raised rates, but she did. And I think what's going to happen is the central banks now are going to have to think very carefully, should we raise interest rates or not, because this could impact further the smaller banks and lead to a bigger crisis. So therefore, they're in a dilemma what to do: solid inflation or rising interest rates. Not really sure which direction to go there. What's going to happen is the banks are going to print more money. They're going to have to print more money. We're going to have to go through another quantitative easing, and they're going to have to pay a load of billions to all these banks that have failed to save the system. That will push up inflation to around about 30%, not 6%. That is a major problem. You can catch me on Instagram and also on TikTok. You can share, you can comment, you can subscribe, and I'm more than happy to hear what you have to say. Have a good day.